Let me ask you something. Did your team just have an incredible annual kickoff? Well, if you're like me, you have seen SKOs, RKOs, GTMKOs, you name it, some sort of annual kickoff on your LinkedIn feed in the last few months because January and February is kickoff season for the B2B SaaS tech world. And you know what? I love it. I am here for it. Okay. There are big stages, big energy, big vision from your leadership team. And everyone leaves an annual kickoff, whether it's sales, marketing, customer success, everyone leaves feeling super inspired. And now that it's over, you are quietly wondering why nothing has actually changed within your organization. And if you are a customer success leader who's poured time, budget, and effort into an annual kickoff, but you're already seeing your team dip back into reactive check-ins and just working in more of a reactive mode rather than a proactive mode, then this episode is for you. Hello, everyone. I'm your host, Anika Zubair, and welcome to the Customer Success Pro podcast, your go-to space for real talk, expert advice, and actionable insights in the world of customer success. I'm a CS executive leader, award-winning strategist, CS coach, and customer success fanatic. I help CSMs and CS leaders build the skills and the confidence to become revenue-driving pros and scale world-class CS teams. So whether you're brand new to CS or a seasoned leader, this podcast is here to support your growth. Because customer success isn't a destination, it's a journey. And I'm here to be your guide and navigate every step of your journey. So join me every Wednesday where you'll get fresh CS tips, tricks, and strategies you can actually use. Some weeks I'll share my own insights and best practices from working in CS over the last 13 years. And once a month, I'll bring on expert guests to dive into the most relevant and pressing topics in customer success today. So if you're ready to level up, hit subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you tune in, and let's make your CS journey a little bit easier together. Okay, here is what everyone is not talking about on LinkedIn when they're actually posting about their annual kickoff events, which again, all of those posts on LinkedIn, I have loved it over the last 2 months. January and February is busy season for sales, marketing, customer success, revenue teams to really focus in on what matters as we move into this new year. But it is March now, and when this episode goes live, all of that is in the rear view mirror. And just having an annual kickoff with your team, it's really not a revenue strategy, okay? It's a spark, it's inspiration, it's motivational, and having that time together with your team is super valuable. I'm not saying that it's not valuable, and I'm not saying that we shouldn't be having kickoffs. They have their time and their place. Having an annual kickoff, whether it's with your specific customer success team or with the marketing and sales team, or maybe it's a whole full company kickoff as well, having that time and space together, it really sparks energy and it sparks a lot of enthusiasm to start building those revenue engines that we talk about here on the podcast. But sparking conversation and actually building that revenue engine, those are two different things. And today I want to talk to you about why training your team needs to happen every single month if you actually want renewals, upsells, and predictable revenue growth from your existing customer base. Right. There is this well-known learning principle, and it's called the forgetting curve. It shows that without reinforcement, people forget up to 70% of what they learn within days. And there's also this other phenomenon that happens with our brains whenever we decide to learn something is it actually takes 7 times for us to actually hear something and then end up remembering it. 7 times. Isn't that crazy? And even if you were to listen to this podcast with full intention and you actually write notes down, you would have to learn it and listen to it 7 times for it to actually sink in. Because if you just listen to this podcast once, it's likely that you are going to fall into that forgetting curve. And then that curve is going to lead to about 70% of everything in this podcast being lost within your brain and everything else that you have to process on a daily basis. So within days, we start losing all of the context, all of the learnings, all of the energy that we spent together. And that's kind of what happens at annual kickoff events. And as amazing as they are, going into detail and really working in that space over the course of 1, 2, maybe 3 days is amazing. But usually within days, if not weeks after an annual kickoff, your team is back to doing what they've always done or what they've always known. So just think about that, right? Like you spent months, if not half a year, planning an annual kickoff or a team event or some sort of go-to market or revenue kickoff for your team. You guys all travel to this wonderful location, wherever it is in the world. You set up all these wonderful slides with KPIs, with projections, forecasts, with strategy, with outlines of exactly what you want to be focusing on as you move in to 2026 and beyond. And you even maybe put in some workshops and some working time into that annual kickoff as well. And you plan offsite events, team building events, and statistically, most of it will actually fade unless you reinforce it, right? Like all of that time, money, energy that you have spent in building that beautiful kickoff event with your team, unfortunately, it will actually be forgotten or at least fade into the distance unless you actually reinforce it. And I think that's the biggest thing I want you to take away from this episode is that we have to reinforce the behavior that we hope to see within our customer success teams. So if you are a CS leader listening to this podcast episode, I want you to really think, what is the behavior or the change that you wanted your customer success team to actually have this year? Is it making sure renewals go off with a hitch? Is it making sure they identify growth opportunities within a customer? Or maybe it's actually reducing the churn or the leaky bucket that's kind of been having its stay in your organization. Whatever it is, whether it's NRR, GRR, it really doesn't matter what your goals are. It is your job as a customer success leader to really reinforce it. And if you are a CS pro who has a book of business and you are listening to this podcast episode, it's really important to remember that what you've learned at an annual kickoff or what you talked about with your colleagues and friends and fellow workmates it's important to remember that everything you've tried in that space of an annual kickoff, you've got to take it back and try it with every single one of your customers. And yes, it's going to be uncomfortable. Yes, you're going to make mistakes. And yes, it's going to be a little bit awkward when you try to first position value and revenue and calls after learning about it in your annual kickoff. But the only way we actually get better at everything we do in life is by reinforcing it and by trying it again and again and again. And that is why I see so many annual kickoffs actually end up failing companies. And it is a big investment from your company. I know that when I was a customer success leader and part of a leadership team at a growing scale up, we spent hundreds of thousands of dollars to bring our full team together so that we could have that time and space. That is a huge investment from your company and from your leadership team and your board and investors to really make sure that the full team is in line, right? But it's not just about being in line. It's about taking everything you've learned out of that kickoff and making sure that you use it in day-to-day interactions with customers, in day-to-day output with your book of business. It really needs to be reinforced is what I'm trying to say. Now, here's another way of looking at it. Let's say you look at elite sports teams or some sort of professional sporting team or event, right? They don't just train once at the start of season. I've been watching the Winter Olympics and Olympians train so much. Like it is their lifetime of training that they then show up at the Olympics to really show all of their potential, right? They don't rely on just one good event. They don't rely on one solitary training session to be that motivation, inspiration for them to actually win gold at an Olympics, right? They practice every week. Actually, I think most Olympians practice every hour of every waking day that they have. And I just want to be really honest with you. Sales team do the same thing, by the way. And I know I call out a lot of sales references in this podcast, but it is true. When I worked as a BDR and when I worked as an account manager, we had weekly sales teams meetings where all we were doing was practicing our script. All we were doing was talking about how we were going to close out opportunities better, right? Like we were constantly learning, iterating, and training on a weekly basis. And the thing is, as customer success professionals, we think that we take the time to do this, and we really, really don't. And I don't mean to be harsh or call everything out, but I am a straight shooter, and everything that you listen to on this podcast is being as honest and straightforward as possible. In customer success, all of us are running from call to meeting, even whether you're a leader or an individual contributor, you are constantly just on the go, right? You might get 15 minutes, 30 minutes to truly prepare for a customer call. But even when I was VP of customer success, I would just glance at our Salesforce or HubSpot and our CSP, and I would just glance at customer notes and I'd be like, okay, right, let's jump into this call, right? Eventually, I figured it out because I had been doing it for 15 years, right? And I know what the signs to look for. But the hard thing with your teams is they are going to want to spend time to figure all of this out and be more intentional and prepare more and practice more. But what ends up happening is customer teams just think they're going to learn on the call or think they're going to just magically make things happen while speaking to a customer. And yes, we always learn on the job, right? I'm not saying that you're not learning on the job, but being intentional and really practicing and trying things and really testing strategies before you get on a call with a customer is really how we're going to be better in front of our customers at the end of the day. Quick pause from today's episode, because if you are listening to this episode and thinking, my team needs this, well, this is for you, because let's be super real and honest, and let's just call this out. Most customer success teams are busy, busy, busy. Calendars are double, triple, quadruple booked. Calls are happening back to back to back, and emails are flying everywhere. But renewals still feel super stressful. Upsells feel super random, and proving ROI and value feels harder than it honestly should. And your team might know the theory of being strategic, but in the moment, on a live customer call, they end up defaulting back to updates, features, and check-ins. Now imagine something different. Your customer success managers walk into renewal conversations already aligned on outcomes, confidently identifying expansion opportunities through white space analysis, and telling clear ROI stories that connect product usage to real business impact. Forecasting renewals and upsells with clarity instead of that guesswork that we all do every day. That is exactly why we at the Customer Success Pro team have built out team workshops. These are hands-on tactical and practical sessions where your team brings real accounts, real agendas, real renewal scenarios, and we work through them together. From value-led conversations to strategic discovery to ROI storytelling and upsell identification, your team will leave these workshops with practical frameworks that they can apply immediately. And if you're ready to turn your customer success team into a revenue engine, then go ahead and head over to thecustomersuccesspro.com/team-event, and let's talk about designing a workshop for your team. All right, let's get back into the episode. And I know plenty of customer success leaders at companies like Salesforce, HubSpot, some of the biggest companies and best known brands in the SaaS world. And I know they run ongoing enablement for their teams, right? Whether it's forecasting review, deal reviews, coaching calls, you name it, they are constantly helping their teams level up. But In customer success, we often train once a year and expect behavior to change for 12 months. And honestly, for some of you listening, you probably aren't even training once a year, which is another problem in itself, but that could be a different podcast altogether. But again, we usually spend maybe once a year or once every 6 months training our team on new strategies. And I'm not talking about building a playbook or building a new quarterly business review deck. That is not training, by the way. I know a lot of CS leaders think that building out a new playbook, building out a new slide deck, that is training. That is not. There's a huge disconnect there, and I really hope you understand that training your team and working with your team on how to have tough conversations with your customers and how to deal with pricing negotiation and how to deal with identifying upsell opportunities. These do not come naturally. They never came naturally for me. They do not come naturally to anyone, by the way. Even the best sales or marketing people, a lot of the skills do not come naturally. It is something that is practiced, learned, and taught over time. And if you think that putting a QBR deck or a new strategy or a new playbook into your customer success tooling is going to actually help your team hit NRR and ARR numbers, I'm sorry to say that's probably a big disconnect that you are having right now. And you think that, okay, I have this great new deck, this great new strategy that I've put into place, and it's the start of 2026, and now my team is going to fire on all cylinders and going to execute and hit 120% NRR. Again, huge disconnect. Putting together a playbook does not mean that your team has the skills that it's going to take to actually hit your ARR, NRR, GRR, whatever are our goals, okay? And I want to let you know that this disconnect that is happening right now in your organization, it is costing you so much revenue. Now, here is what I am hearing from customer success leaders right now, okay? They are telling me on calls that I have on a weekly basis that renewals are still very, very reactive. Forecasting is super messy and very, very unsure. And upsells feel very accidental or very much like a chance occasion. And the customer success professionals within these CS leaders organizations, they end up defaulting to check-in calls because they're easy, because they're what we know, and it's because, honestly, it's what we've trained our teams on. For over a decade, I would say, we trained our teams to do check-in calls. And I used to do it too, by the way. I am not ashamed to admit that back in 2015, back in 2017 even, I was training my customer success professional team to have weekly, monthly, quarterly check-ins with my customers. But what ends up happening in those check-in calls is the executive conversation really lacks impact, right? We want to build a revenue engine from our existing customers, but the behavior on the ground from our CSMs, they just have not shifted over the years. So you train them at this annual kickoff to really start focusing on revenue, how to actually hit NRR and GRR goals, right? You introduce these new beautiful frameworks, even maybe a new quarterly business review deck, and you talked about value storytelling and how to do strategic discovery. But 3 months later, the same problems are back. I can almost guarantee that if you had your annual kickoff in January or February of this year, and you're listening to this podcast in March, by June or latest July, your team is going to go back to some of the same behaviors and same problems. And you're going to be scratching your head wondering, hey, why am I not hitting my mid-year GRR and NRR numbers? Well, if you are thinking this and you are thinking, what happened? I'm going to tell you. What happened is exactly this. Your kickoff created awareness, which is extremely important, by the way. Having that level of awareness with your team, super important that they know that revenue is the focus, that growth is the focus, and that churn reduction is focus, right? Very, very important that you had that time to bring awareness and to train them at first. But it did not create muscle memory. Revenue skills are muscles, by the way, and muscles are built through repetition, not just by exposing them to a revenue number, right? And I've seen so many mistakes from CS leaders over the last few months and year if giving revenue targets to customer success teams and not actually training them on how to hit those numbers. So let's kind of break down where leaders end up going wrong. So the first mistake, I've kind of already talked about it already, is they start treating SKOs or RKOs or annual kickoffs as the strategy instead of just a spark of inspiration, right? They think that, okay, we're coming together for our annual kickoff, and that's going to really help make sure the team executes, right? And kickoffs should align on vision. They should really energize the team. They should make you excited to jump into the KPIs and goals for the year. And it should also train the team. I do believe that workshops, training, all of that is very valid within your annual kickoff or annual team event, right? But doing it just once, it's not going to be designed to actually carry out 12 months of behavior change and 12 months of execution from your team, right? And the second mistake that I keep seeing happen time and time again is overloading information. Okay. 1, 2, or even 3 days together of doing training, KPIs, some sort of revenue talk or growth talk with your team is a lot, by the way. Even talking about something for an hour in a team meeting is a lot. But if you suddenly put everyone in your team in a room covering information for hours and hours and hours, it's going to be a lot. And your team is going to remember pieces of this, but they're not going to remember it at all, right? Like in 2 to 3 days, you can try to cover forecasting, white space analysis, ROI storytelling, stakeholder mapping, product updates, AI usage, AI agents, cross-functional collaboration. The list can go on and on and on. And honestly, it feels overwhelming. I just feel overwhelmed listing all the things that you cover in an annual kickoff event, right? And it is very cognitively overwhelming for your team, right? People cannot just operationalize 10 new frameworks that they are taught in January all at once, right? So just remember that everything that you've taught at the start of the year, it needs to be reinforced. It needs to be done again and again and again and again. Like, wait, one more time, again. All right. Another mistake that I see happening is there is no reinforcement plan, right? Like you go in, you make all of these beautiful changes, strategy updates, revenue targets, objection handling, upsell targets, upsell planning, all the wonderful things that you spent months preparing for at the end of 2025. You delivered it to your team at the start of the year at kickoff, right? But then there's no reinforcement plan, right? I see leaders do this all the time. They're like, okay, team, here's the playbook. Here is your 120% NRR goal. And then all they do is ask, how's it going? Or how are you working towards that NRR goal? But instead of asking, how's it going? You should be working alongside your team to really be like, okay, 120% NRR means every quarter we need to increase your book by 5% or by 3% or whatever the number is. And to do that, you need to do X, Y, and Z, right? But not only telling them what exactly they have to do, you've got to reinforce the behavior that you want to see. So if you want to see your team actually having strategic conversations with customers, train them on how to do it. Teach them the questions they should be asking executives. Make sure that they truly understand the customer's business outcomes, not what they're doing with your product, but what they actually care about, right? And what I keep seeing happen is that leaders go and tell their teams to be revenue focused or strategic or make sure that they're executing on the top level to hit NRR goals. But then there's no monthly cadence to actually revisit how to make these skills into a reality, right? And all of the teams I work with around the world, I always tell the leaders, I was like, listen, I am going to come in and I'm going to train your team and it's going to be wonderful and great. And they're going to have tons of new frameworks, tons of new ways of working and an actual account plan to go away with. But I'm not there on a monthly basis. It's your job to run a separate call every single month with your team to help train them. Because as their manager, by the way, you're not there just to manage them in the sense of team management instead of team morale, you're also there to manage their KPIs and their goals and what they're trying to achieve, right? And the only way that you can manage that is by making sure on a monthly basis you are revisiting a skill, whether it's upselling, whether it's objection handling, whether it's white space analysis, whatever it is your job at the end of the day. And also, as a reminder, not only having those monthly meetings is important, but you've got to remember that they practically apply things to live accounts. Because again, you've built these beautiful frameworks, or maybe you've taken one of my workshops or brought me in to work with your team. And I've built beautiful playbooks, workshops, outcomes for your teams to focus on, right? They use the frameworks once, but then they don't go and use them with live accounts, right? There's no accountability loop, and you've got to be that accountability loop for your customer success team so that the knowledge doesn't just stay theoretical, right? And I love running workshops where it's tactical and practical. And the workshops I run literally have worksheets attached to them so that each team member has an account plan that they want to actually go and work on. And they know exactly what types of questions to ask. They know exactly how to show value and ROI to executives. But I'm not their manager. I'm not there to actually see and hold them accountable to the work that has been done. So what ends up happening is knowledge stays theoretical, right? And you don't want that because you're taking a lot of time to invest in your team. And then the final thing I will say, which is a big mistake I keep seeing happen, is assuming that managers will coach, right? Coaching and managing are two different skill sets. And just like revenue growth and marketing are two different skill sets, we shouldn't try to assume that our managers are going to coach naturally, because mostly they're probably just checking in and they're just asking how things are going. If there's any accounts that are at risk, they're mostly doing a status check with their team, right? And managers are in the weeds. They are handling escalations. They're building reports. They're firefighting risks. They're doing all the things. But without a structured reinforcement rhythm, those types of skills and those type of coaching initiatives, they fade over time. And then 6 months later, you're back in planning mode trying to fix the same revenue gap that we were talking about in 2025. So instead, what I want you to do is what I want you to focus on is if you want predictable renewals and proactive upsells, you need a monthly enablement rhythm, okay? Not random training, not reactive webinars, not just hoping you give a framework and a playbook and the team will figure it out. You need intentional revenue skill building as a team. And here's what I've done with my teams, all right? First, you pick one revenue lever per month. Whatever that is, you know your business best, right? Maybe month one is forecasting or renewals, or maybe it's upsells, right? And then you need to review live accounts, right? Define leading indicators within those accounts and align on consistent risk language. Practice deal reviews, maybe even actually jump on calls with your CSMs and watch them do it live with customers, right? Make sure you're actually practicing with live customers. And then move on. Month two, maybe it's white space analysis, map out product usage, identify gaps. Tie those gaps to customer business outcomes and then create expansion talk tracks, right? And then maybe in month three, you talk about ROI storytelling for renewals, or you rewrite renewal emails, or you practice executive language, or you connect usage data to measurable impact. And then let's move into month four. Let's do something new where we talk about strategic discovery for upsell identification, role play discovery, right? Like actually practice with your team. And then identify CSQL signals and make sure your team knows how to identify CSQLs and how to correctly document this, right? Practice deeper business questioning and deeper consulting questioning, because I really do believe that in customer success, we are all business consultants. All I want you to do is every month pick one skill, one focus, and apply it to real accounts. Repeat it monthly. That is how good habits form, and that is how you hit 120, 130, 150% net revenue retention. It doesn't need to be massive. It just needs to be consistent, right? Consistency is what actually builds confidence. I wasn't confident when I first started talking about renewals or upsells, right? But I did it again and again and again. So much so that my customers even knew my workflow and knew how I was going to pitch certain things, right? And it became a natural way and a natural cadence for me. But that only happened because I did it week after week, month after month, year after year, right? Confidence builds better conversations. And at the end of the day, better conversations are the things that build better revenue or bigger revenue, I should say. And I want to just say a few years ago, I worked with a CS team that had just completed a huge company kickoff, flew me out to a wonderful location in Europe. They were energized. They had clear targets, clear messaging. But 3 months later, there was still lots of inconsistency around renewals. Things were still reactive. And instead of planning another big event, we implemented a monthly revenue lab, right? Every month we focused on one capability. We practiced on live accounts, we refined value stories, we pressure tested expansion strategies, and then 6 months later, forecasting actually became easier for the management team, renewals felt less reactive for the customer success team, and renewal conversations felt calmer overall, right? And then the upsells were just easily identified. And it's not because we added more content, but because we created repetition. I went and spoke to this team at an annual kickoff, and then for 12 months later, I built a revenue lab for that team. So every month I worked with that team on live accounts because we wanted to create repetition. It's like going to the gym. You don't just build all these muscles and strength from day one, right? Like all of us probably signed up for a gym membership in January. Are we still going in March? I know I am, but that's because I love repetition and I love doing things again and again and again. But for all of us that said we were going to get fit in 2026 and signed up for a great gym and a personal trainer, did we actually put in the work? Did we put in the repetition of a workout, or did we build a revenue lab? You build your strength from weekly sessions that compound over time. Every single time you get on a customer call, this is you building your revenue strength, right? And revenue enablement, it works the same way. So I just want you to remember every week that you have a call is a learning opportunity for you to continuously grow in your revenue enablement. All right. Time for my favorite part in a solo episode. So here is your weekly challenge. I want you to open your calendar. I want you to block one reoccurring revenue enablement session per month for the next 3 months with your entire CS team. Then I want you to define the theme for each month. Month 1 may be forecasting. Month 2 is white space analysis. Month 3, ROI and storytelling. Do not wait for the next annual kickoff, okay? And if you want help building out a revenue lab where I come in and work with your leadership team and your customer success professionals to build out a revenue muscle that's built on repetition, let me know. Reach out. It is something I'm already doing with 5 clients currently, and I'm happy to help more. But I just don't want you to wait for budget season. I don't want you to wait until annual planning for this, right? I need you to start the rhythm now because we are still early on in the year to make sure you hit 120% NRR. Because again, momentum is built in repetition, it's built in maintenance, and it's built in us doing things again and again and again. All right, we covered a lot in today's episode, and I hope you got tons of notes and things to take back to your team. If you want to build a revenue lab, let me know. But let's recap everything that I covered in today's podcast. First of all, we talked about the annual kickoff, right? We have all seen it all over LinkedIn, and it is super powerful. I hope that all of you guys got time with your teams in person in some part of the world where you were able to build that momentum. But remember, an annual kickoff is a spark. It's energizing, it's momentum, but it's not the strategy. Without reinforcement, most learning actually ends up fading quite quickly. And revenue skills require repetition and real world application. The biggest mistakes leaders are making are overloading content and failing to build a reinforcement cadence, right? The solution is really, really simple, okay? Create a monthly revenue enablement rhythm, okay? I kind of already told you exactly what to do. Rewind this podcast, watch it again. I tell you exactly what to do, right? And I want you to focus on one lever at a time. Apply it to live accounts. You got to make sure you try it. If you're not trying it, I'm not doing my job as your coach. So go try it. And please make sure you repeat it consistently. Consistency is what is going to build your revenue muscle. I promise the more you do it, the easier it becomes. And if this episode resonated with you, can you please share it with another customer success leader who is thinking about their enablement plan for the rest of the year? Know that sharing is caring, and I love every single one of my listeners, and you guys are amazing. So if you're not already subscribed, please make sure you subscribe to the Customer Success Pro podcast so you don't miss any of our upcoming episodes. And if you want any help with building out a monthly revenue rhythm for your team, go ahead and head over to thecustomersuccesspro.com/team-event and explore our team workshops. Or feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn because I would love to chat to you further about how to get your whole team running on all cylinders so you hit that 120% NRR mark. And I just want to remind you, SKOs and RKOs, they create positive energy, but those monthly training sessions that you're going to run with your team, that's what's going to actually create your revenue. Anyways, I will see you next week for our next episode. Thanks for listening. Thanks for tuning in to the Customer Success Pro podcast. I hope you picked up something valuable to take back to your team. If you enjoyed this episode, it would mean the world to me if you took just 10 seconds to leave a review on Apple or Spotify. It helps more CS pros like yourself discover the show. And creating new episodes takes a lot of work, so leaving a nice review keeps me motivated to keep creating. And don't forget to hit subscribe on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you listen to podcast episodes. I drop a new episode every Wednesday packed with practical tips. And if you've got a topic you'd love for me to cover or want to be a guest on my show, send me a message. All the details are in the show notes. I'd love to hear from you. And hey, if this episode helped you, share it with a fellow CSM or CS leader. Remember, sharing is caring. Cheers to your CS journey, and I'll catch you next week for our next episode.